then salt was revered and held very sacred. So there are ocean songs, and of course there's prayers for the ocean and the gathering of the salt, and that is one ceremony that was practiced year in, year out, and there was a point in time that it stopped, but in the last 15, 17 years, it's been revived because of a young man that wanted to see that happening again, and so we're grateful to him for bringing that back to our people, and the young men really enjoy that. And I'm sorry. I'd say about in the 50s, late 50s, and then now we're reduced to the red area, which is 3 million acres, including our reservation, which isn't shown on this particular map, to the east, and then a little settlement northwest of this red area near the town of Gila Bend called San Luis District. That one is, I think it's probably like maybe 120 acres or so, very, very small. And our reservation is 73,000 acres. You can go ahead and advance it. Yes. Yes. Yes, it is. Yes. That one was created probably like in the 70s. The reason that one came about was because some of our people had gone there to work in the fields, and then they just settled on this land that one of the people that owned one of the farms that they were at, where they were helping working as laborers, allowed them to stay there, and then eventually just turned into a permanent settlement. So they, through the tribal council, they requested the federal government to go ahead and add that 20 acres as part of the reservation. And the individuals that began to reside there came from a district in the center of the main reservation called the Achi district. So that settlement by Florence is politically part of that district. That's a very good question. How are the other entities, tribes related to us, which is Akimanawdam is Gila River, on Akimanawdam is Salt River. And before the creation of the reservations and being placed on these reservations, we actually were one huge group of O'odham, and we speak the same language pretty much, but it's the dialect, and then the ceremonies are the same. There's some dissimilarities just based on the regional areas, but we were placed in these different reservations because of the federal government saying so. And they, as my understanding, the federal government wanted to limit the amount of people that they had to deal with once the settlements came in. So they wanted to confine it to one headman, one chief, one president, chairman, whatever term that was used back then to begin the formation of the reservations, so that it would be limited who they would be able to work with to be able to I guess acquire the lands that the non-O'odham were going to settle on. So that's how we're related, and we still very much to this day socialize, and we interact with our ceremonies, and we support one another. So when the Spaniards came in the 1500s, this picture is a rendering of a Hohokam settlement, and the people that let me use this is Bill Doyley. His firm allowed me to go ahead and use this particular one. And the way it looks to me, it seems like, of course, certainly there was a lot of water back then, and it was used primarily for farming, and beans, corn, squash, and even the cotton, and then the chili. And so when the Spaniards came, they found us thriving and being very, you know, self-sustaining. And of course, they came looking for gold, and which we didn't have. So they just moved forward northward. But with them, they brought, of course, Father Kino and Catholicism. So the implements that we had been using traditionally were made out of wood, and Father Kino brought metal implements to make it a little bit easier for us to farm with. And I'll show you a picture a little bit later of how we had been farming. Traditionally, though, the way that we farmed was that we just had a planting stick, and we would pray and have a song prior to planting. And then once that part was done, we would go ahead and start planting. And when each seed was put into the ground, we would ask that seed to give us her bounty so that we could continue to survive. And then through the whole, at the end of the time when it was time to harvest, there was again prayer, song, and then we harvested. And then the harvest, in some cases, was a lot. So our relatives from west of us would come and help us harvest, and we would pay them with whatever the food crop might be, and then they would take that. And so that was the kind of cycle that we used to have. And then, of course, Father Kino also brought wheat for us to plant during the winter time. So that was some of the positive sides of the European contact with the Spaniards. And certainly there was periods of time when our people resisted how the missionaries had treated us. However, our people were there because when the missionaries came, they provided a place of shelter and food, and then they were paid through food, but of course it was some hard labor. And I know that there was some uprisings from our people against the Spaniards and the missionaries. And I remember hearing that in one church, just today, it's called Mexico, San Ignacio, it was burned down, and because of that kind of rebellion, but it's since been rebuilt. So there's a lot more to say about that. Oh, go ahead.
No, that's okay.
Push advance, please. So I just wanted to show you this picture, which is, I believe, around the 40s, 1940s. This picture is from Martinez Hill, which is just east of the present-day Santa Mission and across the interstate. And it's looking south, and you can see the vast mesquite bosque there, and of course cottonwood was there. And in the very center is the flow of the river back then. And then later on, as time went, the middle picture, a few more years afterwards, when there was when the settlement started here in the Tucson area, they began to dig wells. So they were drawing water from the aquifer. The aquifer began to be lowered. So the top layer of the earth was a little bit drier than prior years. And then, so of course, when it rains here too, with the tremendous thunderstorms that we used to have, they would just bring volumes of water down the river. And so that's why it was what began to create the river as you see it in the middle picture here. And then the bottom picture, by then, a few years later on, it had expanded even wider and incised. And today there's areas where it's like 30 feet deep, and it's probably about at least a half mile across, and it's very different than compared to the top picture. So of course, with the and then the flow stopped because of all the groundwater pumping, and so with that, all the mesquite is gone, all the cottonwood is gone, and very different than when before the Spaniards came. Go ahead and advance to the next one. And I'm showing you this because water's life, as we all know, and we hold it very sacred to us. And this is another picture of the same area that I showed earlier. You can go to the next one. And this shows all the cottonwood that were there along the river. And you can go ahead. And another picture. And I know that I think when all the cottonwood and the mesquite were there, they were just really tall, 30, 40 feet. And it was the trunks, I remember as a young man, a young boy, by then they were dried. It was just a trunk and no limbs or anything, but you could hardly put your arms around them. And it was just amazing, and you know, how it must have been. And then of course this is the Santa Cruz. This says near Martinez Hill, but I'm pretty sure this is more like a mountain, yes. So it's mislabeled. So I apologize for that. So I know some of you know all this information too, and I appreciate your interest in learning the history. And this picture is what really I wanted to show you, not so much the verbiage on here, but this shows how our structures used to be years ago. And as you notice, that there really wasn't a ramada, which we use now, and but I believe that ramada came from the Spaniards. But we lived outdoors because of the weather, and then in wintertime we lived in structures such as this. And then the kitchen area was simply a round structure, ocotillo structure, facing east, and the women folk would go in there to cook. And then, we again, we just lived outdoors and subsisted with all around us. We go to the next one. And so this particular picture, I believe, is from the 30s, and it shows our women gathering water at the water hole. And you see how the water doesn't look so pure, clear, and we didn't know any better. We needed the water, it provided us the moisture, sustenance that we needed. But the way it was, actually, it had minerals in there, so it did help our systems, even though it wasn't quite clear as what we're used to today. And the woman on the right side here, these wells, hand-dug wells, were probably like 8 to 10 feet deep, because again, the aquifer was much higher years ago. And you can go to the next one. And this shows a woman carrying ollas. What she has on her back is called a burden basket. And I'm told that the burden basket used to walk back when, or Maker Itoy created us, and then the burden basket. So, it was very helpful. But the reason that it stopped walking was because some little kids were making fun of it. And so the burden basket, just stopped walking. So that's what I was told. And she was probably here in the Tucson area selling ollas or even wood. So this is the picture that I was referring to earlier about farming methods. Well, this is back in the 30s, and they're actually using the metal implements for farming. And then the person on the right is simply putting the seeds by hand into the ground as we used to prior to, prior to the Spaniards' arrival here. So as I mentioned, we have 3 million acres, and this is what we're confined to now. And the size of this area is close to the state of Connecticut. And then our community is to the right where the star is, and we have 73,000 acres. And to its right, where the star is the river flow of Santa Cruz River. And then the last slide, if you can, move forward. This I'm showing you because while we got the 73,000 acres for a community. The government also passed what was known as the Dawes Act. They gave parcels of land to individual of them or their families, and these range from 20 to maybe 120 acres to be able to have us be mainstreamed into American society. And the land could be encumbered for loans to buy seed, to buy farm equipment, and in other areas to buy timber equipment for timber sales. And so, you know, that was the intent. But for us, we never looked at it that way, as having it as our own. We looked at it as still being held communally, and that's still how we used it. And in other reservations, like in the Midwest and the Northwest, they actually encumbered it so much that they couldn't pay back the loan, so the bank came in and possessed the land. And so once that happened, that particular parcel, the allotment, went out of trust. So it was no longer part of the reservation. So in some reservations, you have checkerboarded areas, so it's Indian land, non-Indian, or there's portions that have been removed from the reservation altogether. So I mentioned these things because this is what we deal with the Indian Land Working Group that I belong to. And some tribes today have been able to reacquire their traditional lands. And so I'm grateful that they have the wherewithal to be able to do that. So if you want to go back to the top slide, appreciate that.
The very first one?
Yeah. The second one, I'm sorry. Okay, so having grown up in Wak Chikshun, Sandberg District, I remember walking and playing in the fields just east of my present day home, which is north of where my friend Martine lives, and it's behind the Sandberg Mission Church. And there was huge trees of mulberry trees. And we'd be running around without our shoes and, you know, just enjoying ourselves. And we spent all day out in the fields and then going to the river. And what we had to eat all day long were those mulberries. And then by sundown, we would come home. And the summer times when it would rain like clockwork, there were areas where the water would pond and we'd go swimming there. And we tried to lie to our moms when we got back home to tell her. She'd ask, "Did you guys go swimming again?" And we'd say no. And we said, "Well, your clothes tell me otherwise." Which was all right. I mean, for us, we enjoyed it, but you know, she had to wash all her clothes and all the mud out of them, I suppose. But the rains, I remember too, they would come from the east. And first of all, you would see just the huge, we call it jigos, and some people call them chubasco, I guess in Spanish. And you could see it coming from the east, and we'd hustle and get everything into the house, things we didn't want to blow away or get wet, and it would come. And it would be like that for maybe, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes or so. Then after that, the thunder and lightning and the rain, it would just rain and rain. And then when it passed by, everything was quiet again, and all you could hear were frogs throughout the whole night. And of course, sometimes mosquitoes came. And you know, it seemed to happen like 2-3 weeks at a time, day in, day out. It was just really something. And I miss those times. I really miss the weather pattern, the way it used to be. And perhaps it will return again at some point. And you know, the Sandberg Mission Church, it looms in our community, and Catholicism, you know, it in some respects it may have been forced on us in the beginning, but I'm told that by our elders that they actually were told that people of light skin color would come into our community. And so when the Spaniards came and they had Catholicism and the way it was taught by Father Kino, they, when they understood what Christianity was about, they viewed it as something that might be helpful to our people because they had the same values: love, faith, hope, charity, sharing, all the values that we as all the people held already. And so, we went ahead and began to be Christianized. And then today, it still is in our particular community, probably 80% of our people are Catholic, and the rest we worship in another way. But all throughout that, though, we still looked to our medicine people. We still prayed in our own ways and held our ceremonies. We just didn't make it public to the others that had come to us, the Spaniards and the priests and so on. So we, it unified our community, and it still unifies our community. And we hold annual celebrations, and we're certainly grateful to the patronatos for all their work to be able to make sure that the church remains standing, and it's a pristine interior, and just consistent work to maintain the current structure. And I went through the Catholic school there that's next to the church, Salon Mission School, and I recall attending first grade, and I didn't know any English. So it was something very interesting and, of course, foreign. And eventually, though, we began to learn the English language. And I certainly remember all the nuns that were teaching us, and they were, of course, strict. And there was one nun who was seemed to be really strict, and she was the boss of all the other nuns, and we'd always run away from her. But the other nuns, they were very kind. But at any rate, it was very interesting. And then by sixth grade, then I went to public school, and then after that, I just maintained everything from public school through high school. And the Catholic religion, the way that I understand the feast days that have come about, they, well, first of all, let me back up. The churches in any indigenous area were placed at an area where our people were already naturally gathered, so that the church, could be built there so that our people or the indigenous people would still go there to worship. And but it took away from the sacred site or whatever ceremony was held there. And in our case, there used to be a pond just north of the little hill that's east of the Santa Mission Church, and then it flowed around to the backside and into the field area. And but again, because of the groundwater being lowered, the pond dried up. But the Catholic religion had all their own set of feast days, saints, and so our people went ahead and started becoming part of that, and we would celebrate with the Mass, and then as all the people, we would always celebrate and provide food for whoever was there, and so that became part of the feast days as well, to be able to feed all the people that came to the Mass, and then to celebrate. And part of the celebration also what evolved were the social dances called Waida, and initially they were all string instruments and just a drum, and they were based on norteño music from south of us in Mexico. And then eventually, as time went on, then they added the trombone and the accordion, and then that's the kind of music that we have today. And some of you, I'm sure, have heard that Waida music. Waida means dance, which comes from the Spanish word baile, and our Ogden language. Some of the words today came from the Spanish language, such as caballo Escalio, horse. And some of our elders say that our Hoka people spoke, very different, all of them. And they told me that we probably won't understand them. But, we believe in our hearts and minds that we Hoka are our ancestors. And the other day I was reading an article that said perhaps after the Hoka left in the 1400s, first they were here from 300 BC to about 1400, 1450 AD. They left perhaps because of a drought that occurred in this area, and they didn't know where they went. Maybe they went back south to Mexico area. And then later on in the 1600s, a present day all of them arrived, and they believe that maybe we came from south again, northward here, and we established the areas where our Hokum ancestors resided years ago. So that's my brief personal perspective, and I really appreciate all of you being here this evening, and also our friends out there on the Zoomers, as Amy called you. So I'll just go ahead and open it up for any questions that any of you might have. Yes.
Is there a distinction, or what is the distinction between Pima and Oa? When you hear about the group, a lot of times you're Pima village. What is, how do you define it?
The question was, how do we define the distinction between Pima and Autumn? Okay, so actually, it's really a label that was placed on us by anthropologists, and to us, it's one and the same. Yeah, but I know that in present-day Mexico, there's a group called Pima Bajo. I think they're east of Hermosillo, and that particular settlement, the indigenous people from there, their language is very similar to ours. And our Akimat, all of them brothers up north have traveled over there, and they've sat down with them to try to really understand each other language-wise. And I'd like to get over there sometime myself. Yes. Oh, sure. Sure. I was asked to talk about the Xavier Cooperative Farm, and in the beginning, we had individual farm plots, it's all of them, and we diverted the water from the Santa Cruz River to those plots. And as time went on, and because we began to become acculturated into American society, and finding jobs here as laborers, or women folk would sometimes work as cleaning homes here in the Tucson area, or different jobs that they acquired to be able to acquire funds, money to be able to subsist, because we were no longer able to subsist just on the land. We were in a cash economy with American society, so we needed to also bring in some revenues. So there was some, the interest in farming every day kind of went away. And so the ones that wanted to continue to farm thought of the idea of leasing the land to outside farmers, which happened. And they were paid because they owned these allotments that I mentioned earlier. And all of the farming area today are all allotments. But traditionally, all the farmlands were right along the riverbed, Santa Cruz River, and even the Hohokam settlements. They were all along the riverbed area. So when one of the leaseholders left, then the idea came about, well, let's get our lands together and be able to make it one big farm. So the idea of a cooperative came about. And so the leases, the individual, all of them that had interest in these lands, signed a lease with the Santa Cruz Cooperative Association. And so that's what we have today. And so we continually had been growing the same crops, corn, beans, squash, and the farm, or excuse me, when the when they were leased out to a non-Alden farmer, they grew either just simply all cotton, and that provided some jobs for people back then, or they grew different crops. I remember one time they were growing lettuce and just different things along those lines. But when the co-op came into being, their intent was to continue to grow the traditional crops, but at the same while some commercial crops, because growing traditional crops requires intensive labor, and so there's more money that's needed to grow the traditional crops, and then the commercial crops. In this case, these days it's alfalfa. That brings in the income to be able to help maintain the traditional crops. They're also looking at harvest or growing orchards. They've been experimenting with some different types of fruits, and they're also looking at possibly hydroponics using some of these Central Arizona Project water that we get today. And when the Santa Cruz River went dry, and it then affected the farms because the wells had to be dug deeper, and that costs money. And these wells are placed in the farm area and in the community by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And so when it seemed like we couldn't reach the aquifer, some of our people that were on the co-op farm as board members, they decided to go ahead and file a lawsuit against the United States and then all of the water users in the area. That was in 1975, and they wanted to restore the water rights that had never been talked about, and nobody had really looked at that whole idea, at least from our community, maybe they had on the outside. So after 23 years, we settled out of court, and what happened was that Congress passed the Southern Arizona Waterways Settlement Act, and said that they would provide us with 50,000 acre-feet per year of Colorado River water through the Central Arizona Project. And so when that system was built, it then provided the water again for the farms, and so the fields greened up, and again those crops that I mentioned that we're growing today, we're able to grow those. And that's a lot of water per year. We never had that kind of water, so the part of it is used to have a riparian restoration area along the river, which is about 15 acres. And then we had an arroyos project where we simply put the water into the wash, the arroyos. There was only one, and we wanted to see how it would help infiltrate into the aquifer, and that lasted for maybe I remember, I think it was 8 years or so, just to see how that would all work. And we determined that with that particular arroyo, that there was 1,000 acre feet per year that had been replenished into the groundwater aquifer. And so the rest of the water that we don't use per year, we've worked out agreements with the city of Tucson to use their recharge facilities. And so it's being recharged. And there's a facility just southeast of us. And so all of that water is being placed back into the aquifer, and the aquifer actually has risen. And our wells, the depth of them aren't so deep anymore. And then because of the farming that we're doing as well, and then the arroyo recharge project, the Hickman, we call it the Hickman project, along the Santa Cruz River, that has turned into quite a gem there, because when we worked on it, it was just primarily desert, and there was one lone cottonwood, and we knew that cottonwood had tapped way down into the aquifer. So we built it next to that area. And so when we planted the cottonwoods, they were just simply spindly sticks. We stuck them into the ground along this ditch, a dirt ditch, and then we created a pond, and then we let the water flow. And after several years, these trees are 30 feet high, and there's also some willow. And then the pond, it's, the kids can't stay away from it. So they jump in it every time we have a chance to celebrate or have some sort of activity there. And primarily these days, it's just for the community. So it's really greened up, and we've had Gila monsters and hawks, and there's actually we have a turkey in residence, and I don't know where that turkey came from, but I think he's going to hide in these next few days. And so it's really tremendous to see that. And of course, we offer prayer there for what is evolved, and certainly when the water first came, we offered prayer, and we're very grateful for that to occur. So with all that water penetrating back into the aquifer, the Santa Cruz River has begun to flow in that stretch right there where I-19 crosses and Martinez Hill is on the north. And it's only like perhaps maybe just half a mile at the most, and it's only about maybe 30 feet wide, and it's shallow. That's maybe 10 inches deep. But even with that, the cottonwood has started to come back, and unfortunately, there's the tamarisk, is, there. But we've had so far 2 days of our community, just 10 people go over there and pull them back out, and we also have to deal with buffalo grass. But the other important thing to note with that for the stretch flow is that fish have come back, and it's I can't remember the exact term. Sorry, but of course it's really small. And they told us that it probably came from upstream, and when the floods came, they probably brought them. So it was just, again, something else to be very grateful for. So I hope I answered your question. Yes. Oh, well, yes, but the mesquite, well, there's some that are on the farm, but what has happened is they have a program where people can go out onto the rest of the reservation, the district, to gather the mesquite, bring it, and they can sell it to the farm. And then the farm takes it, I think in Marana or somewhere, to a mill, crushes it up, and then they bring it back. And the same with cholla buds. There's that program as well. And so the farm is being very innovative with that. And yes, they've also created some recipes, books for how to use the mesquite. And the mesquite, traditionally we just eat them and spit out the seeds, but we'd also crush them and make it into a drink. And it depends on where you get your mesquite, because some trees are very sweet and others not so sweet. So, by experience, you know which ones they are. And there's a yellow one, and then there's the red ones. So. Oh, yes. Okay. So each district is different and unique in its own. And these districts, they're political districts. But actually, they were grazing districts. Is how they started out. And when our Constitution was created in 1936, those grazing districts became political districts. And what happened was because, what happened was that in the Constitution it says that each district can elect its chairman, vice chairman, and council. Then we have a large overall tribal council, we call legislative council, and a chairman, vice chairman for the whole nation. So the Baba Kuber district, Babakibri refers to the mountain, and actually it's Wawagiwara. And Wawagiwara is means that the big monolith, the rock, is like there was a belt that was taken and squeezed to bring it in like that. That's what it loosely translates to. The Babakibri district worked with the Tohono Legislative Council to go ahead and construct that museum. And the museum is I think it's closed now just because of the COVID-19. And but they have displays from regarding the whole nation, but also specifically to each district. Prior to the pandemic, they were wanting to focus on Xavier and another district, but that never came to be. But when the pandemic is over, I urge you to go visit. It is quite a drive, 60 miles to Cells, and then maybe 15 minutes south to Powell Village, and that's where the museum is located. The form of government that I was mentioning is not our traditional form of government. Traditionally, each village had their own headman, and it was led by men. The men were the ones that made the decisions, and they met in the roundhouse, which is a structure made out of mesquite, and it's round, and also it's arrowy. It's placed on the outside with the swara ribs to hold them in, and usually there was a fire in the middle, and they would meet until they came to a decision, whether that decision, whether took them overnight, or 4 days, whatever length of time it took to resolve a particular issue in the village. That's how they used to make a decision, by consensus. So everybody agreed to what they wanted to do. And before they started, they would have tobacco, and they would use the corn husk and the tobacco to smoke. All of the men smoke. Excuse me. So when we say in all of them to smoke, it's June. And when we refer to a meeting, a gathering, it's called June Yugiba. So it was really based on, because of that tobacco. And when the tobacco was being shared or with everybody, there was also a prayer said. So even to this day, in our tribal council sessions, we always pray at the beginning. And I realize that you're supposed to separate church and state, but we ignore that. Because we know, that we've been told the reason that we're here is because Creator placed us here. The Creator has also told us, as all the people do, share, care, and be helpful to one another. And so, we've always had that kind of mentality about being in this world, and that relates to the plant life, animal life, and everything that we do. And so, I'm very grateful that we're still here today, but it's because of our ancestors and their prayers for us to have a better life today. So, prayer is very powerful. Prayer is very important to us. So, just wanted to mention that about the political system and a little bit of the history of that. Any other questions? Yes.
Are there any people from the Senegal district who harvest the water?
Oh, good question. The question was, do any of the Senegal district community members harvest the swara fruit? And yes, most certainly. We have Aboriginal rights to be able to harvest the swara fruit and other fruit, whatever we need, on public lands, and in this case, the National Forest, Swara National Forest area. There's an agreement for them to continue to allow us to do that, because that's where we used to go, have always gone from Xavier to that area. And that continues today. families would go and just camp out there, and they'd rise up before the sun came up, and then start gathering even before when you could barely see. And then they gather till about 10 o'clock and go back to their camp, start cooking the fruit, and then sometimes they go back out again just before it got dark in the evening. And then they used to stay there maybe a week, couple of weeks. And then once they were, in the meanwhile, they were cooking and making the jam, the syrup, and then they take that back home. The syrup, well, when it was gathered, it used to be just the women. And I know Gail was talking to me that there's a koipat over here, the stick that's used to bring the saguaro fruit down. It used to be just the women to go gather, and the men would be there to help with the fire and whatever, protect the family that were there out there in the desert. So when they went back home to Santa Vera, then or even in other areas on the main reservation, there were different areas like that as well. When they go back to their village, then the syrup was actually put in the roundhouse in Oyas, and there's a fire outside. They would get the fire and then put the coals inside the roundhouse next to the Oya, and they would cook it for 4 days and to make the ceremonial wine. And so during that time when it was cooking, in the evenings, our people would go and have social dancing called koimeri. And the purpose of that is to pray for rain. So when they dance, there's a fire in the middle, and then there's medicine men with their eagle feathers who are also in front of the fire, and then the dancers go around them, the dancing. And these songs are, there's 4 sets, and they end up singing 16 sets, but it's throughout the whole night. And while they're dancing and singing, the medicine people are in the center using the feathers to pray to call the rain. And I'm told that, there was one powerful medicine man that when he stopped praying, everybody would take a break and would touch his feathers, the tips of them are moist because of, to call the rain. And so after the 3rd night, in the morning of the 4th day, then the dancing, the prayer were over. The saguaro sort of fermented into a wine, and it was really not that strong. It was only 2% by volume, I'm told. And then then that wine was shared with everybody, and it was given to you. And however big the cup was, you had to drink it. And so they would pass it around for 4 times, and then after that, they would start singing all of them songs. And people came from different villages, and they would start to compete with their songs, and they would stay there until they drank all the wine up. Then they left. But that was the only time that our people used to drink any alcohol. And then I'm told that when they left, 4 days later, the rains would come, and then the crops would grow. So that's how we used to call the rain, and that's why we very much revere the saguaro fruit as well, and even the cactus, the saguaro cactus. Women folk would tell the saguaro, speak to them and tell them, we need your fruit, we need rain, we need to continue to live, so we're going to take some of you for that reason. And then they would go ahead and harvest. And we would, we considered the saguaro to be almost human as well. So thank you for that question. Anyone else?
Oh,
Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, Greg has one. Go ahead. Do you want to? Let's try.
How many
In Sonora, there is probably like 1,500 all of them that live in Sonora. And I think, 15 villages. They're very small. And it's amazing because all of them in Mexico speak all of them in Spanish. And some are trilingual, they speak English. I think most of the younger people today are trilingual. And they've never lost sight of the fact that they're all of them, even though Mexico doesn't recognize indigenous people for who they are, everyone is a Mexican citizen. But all of them in Mexico have continued to maintain ties with us here in the US. And we travel over there into New Mexico to a place called Quitoba, just south of Brookville, Sonoita. Yes, thank you. And they hold an annual ceremony there to also pray for rain called Huiquita. And that ceremony was held in Santa Rosa Village, the Achi district, one other place, and it also used to be held in Santa Vera. But the reason they're not held in those areas any longer is because the ceremony had to be carried through the bloodlines of the family. And so the family lines stopped for those people who conducted the ceremony, but only the ones in Quitoba, Mexico, continue to do that today. So the rest of us, we go there to get lessons to help pray with them when that time comes. And that's usually late June, early July. And so the Aldermen in Mexico, they really have it rough. They were able to subsist because, again, they lived with the land. But as time went on, and they had to also they had begun to rely on a cash economy in Mexico. They were doing well, and all of us on this side were doing well at Autumn until the influx of the people who were human trafficking or drug trafficking. When all that started, it affected our Autumn in Mexico, and they took over their villages at one point and used them for themselves, the drug cartels. So all of them came to the US or elsewhere in Mexico, subsided a little bit, and then they were able to go back again. But within the last 2 years, it happened again, and it seemed like it was even worse. They actually began to burn some of their villages, the ranches. And so, I continue to pray for them, but they're managing somehow to be able to survive and hope that things improve for them. So I hope I responded to your question adequately.
Okay, so here's the question. There are 3 questions from the viewer. The first is the staff that was being used on a woman with burden basket staff, and what are the reasons for this?
Good question. A crooked staff. You mean the one that she's using to walk with, or part of the burden basket? The burden baskets, well, generally they are made out of saguaro ribs, and the ones that I've seen are pretty straight, and so they're used to carry wood, and then also, like I mentioned, the ollas, which contain water. And I'm not sure if not real sure if they carry children in there. Maybe they might have. I never heard that, but I think it's generally utilitarian uses.
Okay, and our next one is, in your many years as Salon chairman, can you speak about what you consider some of the greatest challenges that you Can you repeat that one?
Yes, the question was, in my 10 years being chairman of the district, what have been the greatest challenges that we faced, and how have we overcome them? And so there's first, the one that I want to point to is the land dispute I guess, internal land dispute that came about when we had a developer from Palm Springs area that was funded by Canadian money approach our council with the idea of building a city for non-Waltham, 110 non-Waltham on 13,000 acres right along Interstate 19. And the council believed that, well, perhaps it's something that might benefit the Alati landowners because that whole area was allotted. And they knew that, you know, the landowners, as we call them, and Alatis we also call them, you know, could derive income from leasing their land. So that's how they probably looked at it. But they told the developer that we'll agree in principle, but you need to go out there and secure 51% approvals from all the people that own these allotments. And once you do that, then you can come back and then we'll consider what we want to do. So the developer, you know, had drawn up these maps of how the, I guess would be bedroom city of Tucson. So what it essentially would be, condominiums and what have you. And so this was shown in the community, and then they hired people to go out and gather signatures. And so immediately, some of us it didn't sit well with us. Others were kind of like, well, maybe. And at any rate, the ones that wanted it, the ones that didn't want it in the community, there was friction. And we just, those of us that didn't want it, you know, we were thinking of not just us, but those yet to come. Did we want to saddle them with that kind of situation? And we knew that if that happened, our community would cease to exist the way it had always been. And so we went ahead and hired experts to help us, technical legal experts, and we were able to determine that what they were proposing was that it would really be $50 an acre per year that they would be providing to these landowners, instead of the thousands of dollars that the developer was saying that they could derive from such a project. So in the end, we were able to finally get to the point where the final decision was to be made. But right about that time too, elections were coming about. And so the pro developers had their team lined up to put in the office to make sure the project would go through. Our end, we needed to do likewise. So, you know, for good or bad, since nobody else wanted to step up to the plate, I volunteered to do that. Exactly. And then I was, you know, I was that determined in my own mind because I didn't have my son and my daughter. They were just, you know, they were like 1 and 2 years old. And I was thinking about them and didn't even think about any grandchildren. But at any rate, you know, I just said, well, you know, just go forward and see what happens. And, you know, I was looking to my elders who were part of our anti-development group. And they just didn't want to, I guess, deal with the politics or whatever. But at any rate, it was just by happenstance that all of that occurred. And when the election results came in, it fortunately came out with 2/3 of the vote as opposed to the pro-development group. And so once that came in, and then of course there were council seats available, so some of our group got in as well. So we felt very good about that. And then we just simply told the developer that, hey, look, this is what we found out. You know, you're telling us the truth, and you know, we don't need you, and we're going to dissolve any agreements that were in place before. So that ended that. So what happened was that we thought, well, how do we stop this from happening in the future? So luckily, we had one of our community members who was working with Pima County Planning Department at the time. And she said, well, you know, other jurisdictions, they develop land use plans, and then the develop these regulations, zoning, and what have you. We should think about doing that. And so that's what we did. We stepped in that direction. And so and we developed a development review process for anyone that wants to come into the community to do anything to lease land or any project. They have to go through that process. And so we began to build that kind of foundation and then really look at all our resources as well, how to safeguard them, and then began to look from the outset for grants to help us move forward. So, you know, we began really being our own government, similar to the neighboring jurisdictions here in this area. So that's one thing. And then the train's coming. We call that wine number carded iron wagon. So sorry, Zoomers, you may not hear the train, but okay, I think it's passing. So the other challenge, of course, was the water rights challenge that I mentioned. And so that also gave us pause to look at the allotment situation. Because, you know, with those allotments, there's guaranteed rights to people from having interest in those lands. And water rights was one of them. And so we used that to be able to go forward once we found our water attorney to work with us to convince even our own tribal council that, you know, we had a case. We wanted to be able to make sure that we always have water for the future, for today and for the future. And the tribal council wasn't quite sure, but we went ahead anyway and pursued it on our own. But then 2 years later, the tribal council, the tribal council, went ahead and joined us in the lawsuit. And so having those allotments was the key for us. And for the mere fact that, you know, in order for us to continue to using our land, we need water. I mean, that's just very basic for anybody. But for us having lived with that water source and, you know, being dependent on it for hundreds of years, you know, we established that water right already, and just by using it. And so we were able to win our case. And well, actually, no, we didn't win our case, as I mentioned earlier. We settled out of court, and realizing the city of Tucson also needed water, the outlying community members here needed water. That was a tumultuous time, because I know that everybody was angry at our community for taking that action. And they began to also look seriously about the water rights here. And so I think it, you know, made everybody look at how can we all best live here in this desert community and still be able to have water for everyone. And so, you know, we were able to get the government to supply us that water, but it also supplied the city of Phoenix, the farmers in Pinal County, and farmers in Marana, and then of course city of Tucson. And then today it also provides water for Green Valley and the Farmers Investment Company. Dick Walden and Nan Walden we're good friends now. So, you know, some good positive things have come out of the whole water rights challenge. And, you know, it's still not over. We still have to continue to look at that. And all of us living here in this region. So those are the two that I wanted to speak about.
One more question. How do current events impact your stock loss at all?
Oh, okay. Good question. The question was, how do current events or current events impact our salt journeys to the Gulf of California? Well, very loaded question.
Yeah.
First of all, when they began to have the salt journeys, all of them in Mexico were also made aware that, you know, the journey was going to begin again, to be renewed again. And so they were, you know, very supportive. And I think, I don't know how it happened, but they also let the drug cartels know that we would be coming through the area. And surprisingly, they were actually supportive. They, you know, because they're on these high mountain areas and they could see for miles. And so they were kind of guarding the group as they went to the ocean, and then they came back. And so, yeah, I was very happy about that. And, you know, of course, that was part of our prayers to protect them, you know, as they went, and made a sort of safe journey. But then, of course, the current administration began building the border wall. And that, you know, the good thing with that is they have not built on the reservation portion, the 75 miles that we share with Mexico. They've not built there. They've built on the west side and then on the east side. And but there is an area just west of the main reservation and west of the road into Sonoita and Lukeville that was used as the area to move, to cross over. And in that area is a spring, and that's part of our ancestral lands. And the spring is called Arahuaypa, small spring, Quito Baquito. And so that area had begun to be built. There was only like how to this, 30, 40 feet area where they laid the foundation, but the metal wall had not gone up yet. So that area, once the wall is completed, then it would, you know, I would certainly, can't cross there any longer. So as of 2 weeks ago, I think they were very close to closing it all up, but I think that they left a small gap there. So I'm hopeful that it stays that way. So that's what's the current events that have affected the salt journey. And, you know, I'm very grateful that there's going to be a change politically, which is also part of our prayers. And so, you know, we look forward to good things moving forward, although there's still a lot of work to be able to continue to make sure that people who are in positions of power respect us as Indigenous people, respect our ways of living, and, you know, be able to help really live as human beings here on this earth to, as I said earlier, you know, be sharing, caring, be kind to one another, but most of all, importantly, continue to realize that we're all part of the natural system of life. So we need the plant life, animal life to be pristine again and, you know, restore the areas where we've affected them as human beings to be pure again, to clean them all up. So just mention those things. So if there are no further questions, I really appreciate your kind attention, all of you here today, and then those of you on the Zoom call.
Hello.
Well, have a good evening.
Thank you. Did I